Hi, I'm Chris Jordan, and in this video and the next, I'd like to look a little more at the grammar question in the BULATS listening and reading test. So this video will focus on a slightly easier example, and the next video will look at a slightly higher level one. In the first video on the grammar question, we looked at what the question is and how to do it. So if you haven't seen that video already, you might want to go back and watch that first, as this video will follow on somewhat from that. So you might wonder, what kind of grammar do I need to know? In this video, I'd like to look at a little more detail at the different kinds of language or grammar we might need to deal with in this section. Now, to remind you, we called this the grammar section because many of the words you need to think of will be words we can call grammar words. Now, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on the different linguistic or grammatical categories of words that you might meet, because it won't be very helpful and it's likely to be confusing, especially since the focus is really on how words are used together in real-life situations rather than memorizing rules and grammatical terms. However, just to give you an idea though, you're likely to need to think of words such as prepositions, which are going to be really important, or articles and other determiners, auxiliary or helping verbs, pronouns, adverbs, or similar words, and perhaps conjunctions. Now, the important point here is that almost all of the words you need for this section come from a small set of grammar words, and these are words that are likely to be among some of the first words you learned when you started learning English. Well, let's have a look at an example. This is a notice, as you can see, and it's about what to do when you receive a shipment. The question is targeting a B1 or intermediate level, and as we said in the last video, you should start by reading through the text quickly, not worrying about any words you don't know. Just get an overall understanding of what it's about. So I'm going to give you 30 seconds. Go. Now, if we read down to the first gap, we see make sure, our gap, and then a clause. So what pattern generally follows make sure? Well, it's generally followed by a clause introduced by that, although that may be left out too. Now, the next gap is in the next sentence, and with this one, we need to notice that damage has a big influence on the gap. Now, damage can be a verb or a noun, and here it's a noun. So can you think of a preposition that could follow damage? Well, the word we need here is to. As I mentioned earlier though, prepositions are going to be really common in this section of the test. Well, we can move on down now to the next gap, and we see that the sentence seems to have three parts. If we look here at the main clause, do not sign the receipt. When should we not do that? Well, if there's a problem, or. And after or, we can generally expect something equal to what is in front. So can you think of a word that helps us tell when we shouldn't sign the receipt? Actually, this one's fairly easy because it is in fact the same word as in the previous clause, or if only a partial order has been sent. So those are the two situations in which you don't sign the receipt. When it comes to the fourth gap, we need to remember what we looked at with make sure. So the verb is followed by a clause introduced by that. Now, one thing about a clause that's really important is that it has a verb, and at the moment there's no verb in this clause. So, can you think of a verb or a word that will fix this problem? Well, prices and quantities are the subject, and the word needed is are. And finally, we come to this. We see it's a reminder. You have to keep the area clear and tidy, and what else is important? Well, you can't have stock in the aisles and emergency exits. So how do we express this requirement? Aisles and exits are the subject, but by itself, be cannot be the verb here. So what word could go with be to complete the verb phrase and give the sentence the right meaning? Well, it needs to be a kind of helping verb, and in this case, it's a modal. So the answer is going to be either should or must. This raises an important point about this type of question in BULATS. For some questions, there can actually be more than one right answer. So, don't worry if you know there are two correct answers. Just choose one of them and you'll be fine. As in the above example. It didn't matter whether you chose must or should, both answers would be marked correct. Well, that brings us to the end of this video. However, if you're preparing for BULATS or working on your workplace English and you'd like more practice with a slightly higher level BULATS grammar question, please watch the next video in this series. Thank you for watching today and good luck.